Maya Chun had perfected the art of invisibility. At 17, she moved through Lincoln High's crowded hallways like water through stone, finding gaps between bodies, slipping past conversations, never making waves. Her dark hair fell in a curtain around her face, and her clothes were chosen for one purpose: to blend in completely. Most students couldn't even remember her name, though she'd been in their classes for 3 years. The morning started like any other. Maya arrived at school 15 minutes early, not because she was eager, but because the hallways were empty then. She could navigate to her locker, gather her books, and settle into her first class before the chaos began. Her routine was precise, calculated to minimize human contact. She had learned early that attention meant trouble. In elementary school, speaking up in class had earned her mockery for her accent. Her grandmother had raised her speaking Mandarin at home, and though Maya's English was now flawless, the memory of laughter still stung. By middle school, she had discovered that silence was armor. Nobody could mock what they never heard. Lincoln High was a typical suburban school, big enough that students could disappear if they chose to. Maya had chosen to. She sat in the back of every classroom, turned in assignments without fanfare, and ate lunch alone in the library. Teachers appreciated her quiet diligence, but rarely called on her. Classmates forgot she existed until group projects forced interaction, and even then, she preferred to work alone. Her academic record was flawless, though nobody knew it. Maya maintained a perfect GPA not for recognition, but because excellence was her grandmother's expectation. Nai had sacrificed everything to bring Maya to America after her parents died in a car accident when Maya was 8. The old woman worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, and Maya repaid that sacrifice with perfect grades and perfect behavior. But perfection had a price. Maya's silence wasn't just shyness, it was survival. She had learned to read people like storm clouds, predicting when to duck, when to hide, when to make herself smaller. The skill had served her well for years, keeping her safe from the casual cruelty that high school students inflicted on those who stood out. The trouble started in third-period chemistry. Maya sat in her usual spot in the back corner, carefully taking notes as Mrs. Rodriguez explained molecular bonds. She had already read the chapter twice and understood the concepts perfectly, but she wrote everything down anyway. Structure was safety. Maya chuned to the counselor's office. Please. The PA announcement cut through the classroom chatter like a blade. Every head turned toward Maya, who felt heat creep up her neck. She had never been called to the office before, never been in trouble, never done anything to warrant attention. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded toward the door. Take your things, dear. Maya gathered her books with trembling hands, acutely aware of 30 pairs of eyes tracking her movement. Whispers followed her to the door. She had broken her own cardinal rule. She had become visible. The walk to the counselor's office felt eternal. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. Had her grandmother called the school? Was there a family emergency? Had she made some mistake on a college application? Mrs. Patterson, the counselor, was a kind woman in her 50s who genuinely cared about her students. She gestured for Maya to sit in the chair across from her desk, her expression serious but gentle. Maya, I wanted to talk to you about your college plans, she began. Your grades are exceptional, and your test scores are in the 99th percentile. Have you considered applying to Ivy League schools? Maya blinked in surprise. This wasn't what she had expected. I've looked at the state university. It's affordable. Maya, you could get into Harvard, Yale, Stanford. With your background and achievements, you'd likely receive significant financial aid. I think you're underestimating yourself. The conversation continued for 20 minutes. Mrs. Patterson pulled out brochures, talked about application deadlines, discussed scholarship opportunities. Maya listened politely, but internally recoiled from the idea. Elite schools meant attention, meant standing out, meant being noticed. Everything she had spent years avoiding. When the meeting ended, Maya felt disoriented. She had successfully hidden her intelligence along with everything else, but apparently not well enough. As she walked back toward her classroom, she noticed students looking at her differently. Word traveled fast in high school, and being called to the counselor's office was fodder for gossip. The real trouble began at lunch. Maya typically spent the period in the library, but today she needed to submit a form to the main office first. As she walked through the cafeteria, taking the quickest route, she heard her name being called. "Hey, Maya." Maya Chun. She turned to see Jessica Martinez waving her over. Jessica was everything Maya wasn't. Popular, confident, surrounded by a circle of friends who hung on her every word. Maya had no idea why Jessica would know her name, let alone call for her. Reluctantly, Maya approached the table. The conversation at nearby tables died down as students sensed something interesting developing. "So, I heard you're some kind of secret genius," Jessica said, her voice carrying across the cafeteria. "College counselors calling you in for special meetings and everything." Maya felt her cheeks burn. It was just about applications. "Right," Jessica laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. "Little Miss Perfect, hiding in the back of the room, thinks she's better than everyone else." "I don't think that," Maya said quietly. "Sure you don't. That's why you never talk to anyone, right? Too good for us regular people." Maya wanted to disappear. She wanted to sink into the floor and never resurface. The cafeteria was watching now, sensing drama. This was her worst nightmare made real. "Leave her alone, Jess." The voice belonged to Marcus Thompson, captain of the basketball team. He was sitting 2 tables away, but had apparently been listening. "She's not bothering anyone." Jessica's eyes flashed with irritation. "I wasn't talking to you, Marcus." "Yeah, well, I'm talking to you. Pick on someone who fights back." The exchange might have ended there, but Jessica's pride was wounded. She had been challenged in front of her friends, and that required response. "Whatever," she said, turning back to Maya with renewed malice. "We all know what you really are anyway." Maya's hands clenched at her sides. She knew she should walk away, should remove herself from the situation before it escalated. But something in Jessica's tone triggered a response she couldn't suppress. "And what's that?" The words slipped out before Maya could stop them. Jessica smiled coldly. "A fake. All quiet and innocent. But underneath you think you're better than everyone. I bet you go home and laugh at how stupid we all are." "That's not true." "No? Then prove it. Stop acting like you're too good to talk to people." Maya felt trapped. The entire cafeteria was watching now. Teachers were starting to notice the commotion. She had 2 choices: submit to Jessica's demands and become a target for future harassment, or walk away and confirm every accusation. She chose a third option. Maya looked directly into Jessica's eyes and spoke clearly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I don't think I'm better than anyone. I just prefer quiet to noise." It was a simple statement, delivered without malice or accusation. But its implications were clear to everyone listening. In calling preference for quiet over noise, Maya had essentially labeled Jessica and her dramatic display as exactly that, noise. Jessica's face flushed red. She had been outmaneuvered with surgical precision, and she knew it. The watching students sensed the shift. Some looked impressed, others shocked that the quiet girl had responded at all. "You little..." Jessica started to stand, but Marcus was already moving. "That's enough," he said firmly, stepping between the 2 girls. "Both of you let it go." Maya didn't wait to see how it ended. She turned and walked toward the exit, feeling hundreds of eyes on her back. Her hands were shaking, and her heart was pounding. But she had done something she'd never done before. She had stood up for herself. As she reached the hallway, she heard Jessica's voice rising behind her, no doubt rallying her friends and planning retaliation. Maya had made an enemy today, and enemies in high school were dangerous things. She spent the rest of lunch in the library, trying to read, but unable to concentrate. The confrontation replayed in her mind on an endless loop. She had broken her own rules, violated her survival strategy, and now there would be consequences. The afternoon classes passed in a blur. Maya could feel whispers following her, could sense the weight of attention she had never wanted. By the time the final bell rang, she just wanted to get home to her grandmother's quiet apartment and pretend the day had never happened. But as she approached her locker, she found her path blocked. Jessica stood there with 3 of her friends, Brittany, Chloe, and Amber. They formed a semicircle that trapped Maya against the wall of lockers. "Thought you could embarrass me and just walk away?" Jessica's voice was low and dangerous. The hallway was emptying as students headed home, leaving fewer witnesses to whatever was about to happen. Maya said nothing, hoping silence would defuse the situation. She had learned that responses often escalated conflicts. and she desperately wanted this to end. I asked you a question. Jessica pressed closer. Do you think you can make me look stupid in front of everyone and just ignore me? I wasn't trying to make you look stupid, Maya said quietly. I just wanted to be left alone. Too bad. You don't get to be left alone anymore. You want to play games? We'll play games. Brittany and Chloe moved closer, effectively boxing Maya in. The hallway continued to empty, and Maya realized with growing fear that the teachers had also left. She was truly alone with 4 angry teenagers who felt humiliated and wanted payback. Here's what's going to happen, Jessica continued. You're going to apologize for disrespecting me in front of everyone. Tomorrow at lunch. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. The familiar anxiety was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something that had been building for years of hiding, years of making herself small, years of swallowing words and accepting treatment she didn't deserve. No, she said softly. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Jessica blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. What did you say? Maya looked directly at Jessica, and for the first time in years, she didn't look away. I said no. The hallway had become completely empty now except for the 5 girls. Maya was the silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Jessica's hand was still pressed against Maya's shoulder from the shove, but Maya hadn't moved. She stood perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed on Jessica's face with an intensity that made the other girls suddenly uncomfortable. I said, say something, Jessica repeated, but there was less conviction in her voice now. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She simply watched Jessica with the patience of someone who had spent years observing human behavior from the shadows. The quiet girl who had perfected invisibility was no longer trying to disappear. Brittany shifted nervously. Jess, maybe we should just shut up. Jessica snapped, never taking her eyes off Maya. She thinks she's so smart, so above it all. Well, let's see how smart she is when everyone knows what a freak she really is. But something had shifted in the dynamic. Jessica's words sounded hollow in the empty hallway, echoing off lockers that stood like silent witnesses. Maya's stillness was unnerving in a way that tears or protests would never have been. There was something almost predatory in her calm attention. Chloe tugged at Jessica's sleeve. Come on, let's just go. This is stupid. No, Jessica said, but her voice was losing its edge. She needs to learn. Maya finally spoke, her voice so quiet that Jessica had to lean forward to hear it. Learn what? The simple question hung in the air. Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. She had expected many things, but not this. Not the girl who never spoke, turning the conversation back on her with surgical precision. Learn to show respect, Jessica stammered. Respect. Maya repeated the word thoughtfully, as if examining it from all angles. You want to teach me about respect? It wasn't a question. It was an observation delivered with such neutral clarity that it made Jessica's demand sound absurd even to her own ears. Maya had done nothing more than speak quietly and stand still, but somehow she had seized control of the entire interaction. The 4 girls who had cornered her suddenly looked less like hunters and more like children playing a game they didn't understand against an opponent who had just revealed she knew the rules better than they did. You know what respect is? Maya continued in that same soft voice. Respect is not demanding attention. Respect is not making noise to feel important. Respect is not cornering someone because your feelings got hurt. Each sentence landed with quiet precision. Maya wasn't raising her voice or making threats. She was simply stating facts with the calm authority of someone who had spent years watching and learning. Jessica's face flushed red again. You think you're so wise, don't you? Little Miss Philosophy. I think, Maya said, taking a single step forward, that you're afraid. The word hit Jessica like a physical blow. Afraid? Afraid of what? Afraid that what I said in the cafeteria was true. Afraid that you are just noise. Brittany, Chloe, and Amber exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had come here to watch Jessica put the weird quiet girl in her place. Instead, they were watching their leader get dissected by someone who barely ever spoke above a whisper. Maya took another step forward, and this time Jessica backed away slightly. The positions were reversing without any aggression on Maya's part. She was simply moving with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer felt the need to hide. You want to know something interesting? Maya asked, her voice still perfectly calm. I've been watching you for 3 years. All of you. Do you know what I've learned? None of them answered. But Maya could see she had their attention completely now. You're loud because you're empty. You attack others because you don't like what you see when you look in the mirror. You travel in packs because you're terrified of being alone with your own thoughts. The words were delivered without malice, which somehow made them more devastating. Maya wasn't trying to hurt them. She was simply sharing observations, the way a scientist might describe the behavior of laboratory animals. You're a freak, Jessica said. But the words lacked conviction now. Maybe, Maya agreed easily. But I'm a freak who doesn't need anyone else to tell me who I am. She took another step forward, and this time Jessica took a full step back, bumping into Brittany. The thing about being invisible, Maya continued, is that you see everything. You hear everything. You learn everything. And you know what I've learned about you, Jessica? Jessica's mouth was dry. She wanted to speak, wanted to regain control of the situation, but she was mesmerized by the transformation happening in front of her. The quiet girl was gone, replaced by someone who radiated a stillness that felt dangerous. You're not mean because you're strong. You're mean because you're weak. And weakness makes noise to convince itself it's powerful. The hallway was completely empty now except for the 5 girls. Evening light slanted through the windows, casting long shadows that made the scene feel surreal. Maya stood in a pool of golden light, and Jessica suddenly realized that she was the one who felt cornered. Jessica started, then stopped. She had no idea what to say. All her weapons were designed for people who fought back, who cried, who gave her something to feed on. Maya was giving her nothing except truth delivered with surgical precision. Here's what's going to happen, Maya said, unconsciously echoing Jessica's earlier words. You're going to leave me alone. You're going to tell your friends to leave me alone. And you're going to stop pretending that being cruel makes you important. And if I don't? Jessica managed to ask. Maya smiled for the first time, and it was not a pleasant expression. Then, I'll do something I've never done before. I'll start talking. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Maya had spent years observing, listening, learning everyone's secrets. She had been the invisible girl in the corner while classmates shared their deepest fears, their embarrassing moments, their hidden shames. She had been silent, but that didn't mean she had forgotten. You wouldn't, Jessica whispered. Probably not, Maya agreed. I don't like hurting people. But you're not giving me many choices, are you? Brittany grabbed Jessica's arm. Jess, let's just go. This is getting weird. But Jessica couldn't move. She was trapped not by physical force, but by the realization that she had fundamentally misunderstood the situation. She had thought Maya was weak because she was quiet. She had assumed silence meant submission. She had been wrong. Maya waited patiently for Jessica's response, her dark eyes never wavering. She had all the time in the world. She had spent years learning patience, and now it was serving her well. Finally, Jessica found her voice. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Maya said with quiet certainty. You just don't know it yet. Jessica turned and stalked away, her friends trailing behind her like confused ducklings. Maya watched them go, feeling something she had never experienced before, the sensation of standing her ground and winning. But she also knew this was just the beginning. Jessica Martinez was not the type to accept defeat gracefully, especially a defeat that had happened without a single raised voice or thrown punch. She would regroup, plan, and come back stronger. Maya gathered her books from her locker and walked toward the exit. The school was almost completely empty now, just a few teachers cleaning up their classrooms and the custodial staff beginning their evening routine. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallways, a sound that would have terrified her that morning but now seemed somehow triumphant. She had done something unprecedented. She had been cornered by 4 girls who meant her harm, and she had walked away victorious without raising her voice, without fighting, without even being particularly mean. She had simply been herself, but herself without fear. The revelation was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Maya pushed through the front doors of the school into the cool afternoon air. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars belonging to staff members and students in after-school activities. She began the familiar walk home, but everything felt different now. She had crossed a line today, and there was no going back. The quiet girl who had spent years perfecting invisibility had made herself seen, and the consequences of that visibility were yet to be determined. Her grandmother's apartment was a 20-minute walk from school, through a neighborhood that had seen better days, but was slowly gentrifying. Maya had made this walk hundreds of times, usually lost in thought or worry about assignments and college applications. Today, she walked with her head up, noticing details that had escaped her before. The way the light fell through the trees, the sound of children playing in a nearby park, the smell of dinner cooking in houses she passed. For the first time in years, Maya Chen felt fully present in her own life. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to the apartment she shared with her grandmother, her mind already planning for tomorrow. Jessica would not give up easily, and Maya would need to be ready for whatever came next. Nai Nai was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Maya entered, the familiar smells of ginger and soy sauce filling the small space. The old woman looked up from her cutting board and immediately noticed something different about her granddaughter. "What happened today?" she asked in Mandarin. Maya paused in the doorway, considering her answer. How could she explain that she had discovered something fundamental about herself? That the girl who had spent years hiding had found her voice precisely by staying silent? "I had an interesting conversation," she said finally, also in Mandarin. Nai Nai set down her knife and studied Maya's face. The old woman had fled China as a young wife, had raised children in a foreign country, had survived her son's death, and taken responsibility for her orphaned granddaughter. She understood survival, and she recognized strength when she saw it. "You look different," she said. "I feel different." Nai Nai nodded approvingly. "Good. It was time." They prepared dinner together in comfortable silence, but Maya's mind was racing. She was thinking about Jessica's promise that this isn't over. She was thinking about the look of confusion in the other girl's eyes when their expected victim had refused to play her assigned role. Most of all, she was thinking about what would happen tomorrow when word spread about what had occurred in the hallway. High school students love drama, and the story of the quiet girl who had somehow turned the tables on Jessica Martinez would spread like wildfire. Maya Chen had spent years avoiding attention. Tomorrow, she would discover what happened when attention found her anyway. Maya arrived at school the next morning to find the world had changed overnight. Students who had never acknowledged her existence now tracked her movement down the hallway with curious eyes. Conversations stopped when she passed, then resumed in urgent whispers behind her back. Word had spread, as she had known it would. High school was an ecosystem where information flowed faster than rumor, and what had happened between Maya and Jessica in the empty hallway had taken on mythic proportions in just 12 hours. She overheard fragments of conversation as she made her way to her locker. Heard she completely destroyed Jessica without even raising her voice. Just stood there and stared her down until Jessica backed away. Apparently she knows everyone's secrets because she's been listening for years. The stories grew more elaborate with each telling, but Maya noticed something interesting. Despite the exaggerations, the core truth remained intact. She had faced down 4 girls who meant her harm, and she had won through stillness rather than aggression. Maya opened her locker and gathered her books, acutely aware of the attention focused on her. This was exactly what she had spent years avoiding, but now that it was happening, she found she wasn't afraid. The girl who had learned to make herself invisible had discovered something powerful about being seen. "Maya," a voice called her name, and she turned to see Marcus Thompson approaching. The basketball captain looked genuinely concerned, his usual easy confidence replaced by something more serious. "I heard about what happened yesterday," he said quietly. "Are you okay?" It was the first time anyone at school had asked her that question with genuine concern. Maya studied Marcus's face, seeing no hidden agenda, no attempt to gather gossip. Just honest worry for someone he barely knew. "I'm fine," she said, and realized it was true. "Thank you for asking." Jessica can be. Marcus searched for the right word. "Intense. If she gives you more trouble, let me know." "I don't think that will be necessary," Maya said. "But I appreciate the offer." Marcus nodded and started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I think you handled it perfectly. Sometimes the best way to deal with bullies is to not give them what they want." Maya watched him disappear into the crowd, struck by his insight. Marcus understood something that many people missed, that bullies fed on reaction, on fear, on the power they felt when others cowered before them. Remove those elements, and the bully was left with nothing but their own emptiness. The morning passed in a blur of sideways glances and whispered conversations. Maya's teachers noticed the unusual attention their quiet student was receiving, but none of them understood its source. She answered questions when called upon, turned in assignments on time, and generally behaved exactly as she always had. The difference was that now people were watching. By lunchtime, Maya had made a decision. Instead of hiding in the library as she usually did, she would eat in the cafeteria. Not because she wanted to court attention, but because running away would send the wrong message. She had stood her ground yesterday. She would continue standing it today. She purchased her lunch and surveyed the crowded room, looking for an empty table. The cafeteria was arranged in the typical high school hierarchy. Popular students in the center, various cliques arranged around the perimeter, and the outsiders relegated to the corners. Maya had always been invisible enough to sit anywhere without notice. Today, she chose a table near the windows, in full view of most of the room. If people wanted to watch her, she would give them something to see. She had barely opened her book when she sensed someone approaching. She looked up to see a girl she recognized but had never spoken to, Emma Rodriguez, a junior who was known for her activism and sharp wit. "Mind if I sit?" Emma asked. Maya gestured to the empty chair across from her. Emma settled in with her tray and looked around the cafeteria with amused eyes. "You've caused quite a stir," she observed. "The rumor mill is working overtime trying to figure out who Maya Chen really is." "And who am I?" Maya asked, genuinely curious about the conclusions people had drawn. "Depends who you ask," Emma grinned. "Some think you're a secret martial arts expert who could have destroyed Jessica physically but chose psychological warfare instead. Others think you're some kind of criminal mastermind who's been gathering blackmail material for years." Maya almost smiled. "And what do you think?" "I think you're exactly who you've always been. The difference is that now you're not hiding it." The insight was surprisingly accurate. Maya had indeed been herself yesterday, observant, thoughtful, unafraid of silence. The only thing that had changed was her willingness to let others see those qualities. "Why are you sitting with me?" Maya asked. "Because I've been watching you for 3 years," Emma said, echoing Maya's own words from the day before. "You're not the only one who pays attention in this place. I've seen you help classmates with homework without taking credit. I've watched you pick up trash in the hallway when no one was looking. I've noticed how you always hold doors for people and never cut in line." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. She hadn't realized anyone had been observing her small acts of consideration. "You're a good person," Emma continued. "And yesterday you proved you're not going to let anyone walk all over you. That's exactly the kind of person I want to be friends with." Before Maya could respond, she noticed a commotion near the center of the cafeteria. Jessica had entered with her usual entourage, but something was different. The conversations that normally swirled around her had died down, replaced by an awkward tension. Jessica's eyes swept the room until they found Maya. Their gazes met across the crowded space, and Maya saw something she hadn't expected: uncertainty. Jessica was used to being the predator, but yesterday she had discovered what it felt like to be prey. Emma followed Maya's gaze and whistled softly. "This should be interesting." Jessica began walking toward their table, her friends trailing behind her like uncertain shadows. The entire cafeteria sensed the approaching confrontation, conversations dying as all attention focused on the drama about to unfold. Maya set down her fork and waited. She felt calm, centered, ready for whatever came next. The girl who had spent years hiding was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes you had to stand in the light to cast the shadows away. Jessica stopped at their table, her hands clenched at her sides. Maya could see the internal struggle playing out on her face, the need to reassert dominance warring with the memory of yesterday's defeat. "We need to talk," Jessica said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "No," Maya replied quietly, "we don't." The simple refusal hung in the air. Maya hadn't been rude or aggressive, but she had made it clear that Jessica no longer had the power to command her attention. "You can't just ignore me," Jessica said, her voice rising slightly. "I know you're not what you pretend to be." I've never pretended to be anything, Maya said, her voice still calm. You're the one who made assumptions. Emma leaned back in her chair, watching the exchange with fascination. Around them, the cafeteria had gone completely silent, everyone straining to hear what would happen next. You think you're so smart, Jessica said, falling back on her familiar refrain. But you don't know everything. I know enough, Maya replied. Like what? Maya looked directly into Jessica's eyes, and, for a moment, she let her expression shift. The careful neutrality fell away, replaced by something harder, more knowing. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but carried perfectly in the silent room. I know that you started that rumor about Samantha Park last month because you were jealous that Tyler asked her to homecoming instead of you. I know that you cheated on the SATs by copying answers from Ben Chen's phone. I know that you've been spreading lies about Emma because she called you out for plagiarizing your history essay. Each revelation hit like a precision strike. Jessica's face went white, then red, then white again. The watching students began to murmur, processing the implications of what they had just heard. Maya had done exactly what she had promised. She had started talking. And the quiet girl who had spent years listening and observing had a lot to say. I know that you broke up Derek and Melissa by telling each of them that the other was cheating. I know that you stole money from the student council fundraiser last spring. I know that you've been telling your parents you're at study groups when you're really meeting college guys at that club downtown. Jessica was shaking now, whether from rage or fear, Maya couldn't tell. The cafeteria was completely silent except for the soft hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of traffic outside. Stop, Jessica whispered. I know that you're failing calculus because you never learned algebra properly, but you're too proud to ask for help. I know that you cry yourself to sleep because you think your parents love your perfect sister more than you. I know that the reason you're so mean to everyone else is because you hate yourself. Maya's voice remained soft throughout the recitation, but the words cut deep. She wasn't being cruel. She was simply stating facts with the same dispassionate accuracy she had used the day before. The difference was that these facts were devastatingly personal. Jessica's friends had backed away slightly, shocked by the revelations. Other students were pulling out their phones, recording what was happening, already planning how to share this moment across social media. How? Jessica's voice was barely audible. How do you know all that? Because you talk, Maya said simply. All of you talk. You have conversations in hallways, in bathrooms, in empty classrooms, thinking no one is listening. But I'm always listening. I've been listening for 3 years. She stood up slowly, never breaking eye contact with Jessica. The entire cafeteria held its breath. The difference between us, Maya continued, is that I keep secrets to protect people. You share them to hurt people. But I'm done being quiet about the hurt you've caused. Maya gathered her books and started to walk away, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Jessica, if you ever corner me again, I'll do more than just talk. Next time, I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are. She walked out of the cafeteria, leaving behind a room full of stunned students and one thoroughly humiliated bully. Maya Chun had just demonstrated that there were different kinds of power in the world, and sometimes the quietest voice carried the biggest stick. Emma caught up with her in the hallway, her eyes bright with admiration. The afternoon following Maya's cafeteria revelation was unlike anything Lincoln High had experienced in years. Students clustered in hallways, their phones buzzing with messages and videos of the confrontation. The girl who had spent 3 years invisible had become the most talked-about person in school within a single lunch period. Maya walked to her afternoon classes with her head held high, but internally, she was processing the magnitude of what had just happened. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. The careful balance of secrets and silence that had governed her world for years had been shattered in one moment of absolute honesty. In AP History, Mrs. Williams noticed the unusual energy in her classroom. Students were passing notes, whispering urgently, and shooting glances at Maya, who sat in her usual spot in the back corner. But now that corner felt less like hiding and more like a command post. Is there something more interesting than the Industrial Revolution happening in my classroom? Mrs. Williams asked with raised eyebrows. A few students shook their heads and tried to look focused, but the tension remained. Maya opened her notebook and began taking careful notes, just as she always did. The difference was that now she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes tracking her every movement. After class, she was intercepted by two students she recognized but had never spoken to, Samantha Park and Derek Martinez. Samantha was a quiet sophomore who had been the target of vicious rumors a month ago. Derek was a junior whose relationship had imploded in spectacular fashion just before homecoming. "Is it true?" Samantha asked without preamble. "Did Jessica really start those rumors about me?" Maya looked at the girl's hopeful, desperate face and felt a stab of guilt. In her moment of revelation, she had confirmed what Samantha had suspected but could never prove. Sometimes truth was a burden as much as a gift. "Yes," Maya said simply. Samantha's shoulders sagged with relief. "I knew it. Everyone told me I was being paranoid, but I knew it was her. She was so nice to my face, asking all these questions about Tyler and homecoming. And then, suddenly, everyone thought I was." She didn't finish the sentence. Derek stepped closer, his face tight with anger. "What about me and Melissa? Did she really lie to both of us?" Maya nodded. "She told Melissa that she saw you kissing Emma Rodriguez at the football game. She told you that Melissa was texting with college guys she met online. Neither was true." Derek's hands clenched into fists. "We broke up over those lies. Melissa wouldn't even talk to me afterward. She transferred schools because she was so humiliated." The pain in his voice was raw and real. Maya realized that her years of silent observation had given her not just knowledge, but responsibility. These were real lives that had been damaged by Jessica's manipulations, and Maya's silence had allowed the damage to continue. "I should have said something sooner," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. You couldn't have known we'd believe her," Samantha said, though her voice suggested she wished Maya had tried. "Actually, I did know," Maya replied with uncomfortable honesty. "I watched it happen. I saw her plant the lies and spread the rumors. I knew exactly what she was doing." The admission hung in the air between them. Derek studied Maya's face with new understanding. "You've been watching all of us," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "For how long?" "Since freshman year. Maybe longer." Samantha looked disturbed by this revelation. "What else do you know? About me, I mean." Maya considered the question carefully. She knew that Samantha struggled with anxiety, that she took medication for depression, that she wrote poetry in a journal she hid under her mattress. She knew about Samantha's complicated relationship with her perfectionist parents, about her secret crush on the girl who sat next to her in chemistry. But some knowledge was meant to remain private. "I know enough to understand that you're stronger than people give you credit for," Maya said finally. "And I know that Jessica targeted you because she was jealous of your talent, not because of anything you did wrong." It was the truth, but not the whole truth. Samantha seemed to understand the distinction and nodded gratefully. "Thank you," she said, for finally speaking up. After they left, Maya continued to her final class of the day, but her mind was elsewhere. The conversation had clarified something important. Her silence hadn't been neutral. By choosing not to speak, she had allowed harm to continue. The invisible observer was as much a participant in the ecosystem as anyone else. In AP English, Mr. Patterson was discussing moral responsibility in literature, a topic that felt uncomfortably relevant to Maya's current situation. "The question," he said, pacing in front of the whiteboard, "is whether we have an obligation to act when we witness wrongdoing. Is silence complicity?" Maya felt as though he was speaking directly to her, even though she knew the lesson had been planned weeks in advance. Several students glanced in her direction, clearly making the same connection. "Take bystander syndrome," Mr. Patterson continued. "The psychological phenomenon where individuals are less likely to offer help when other people are present. Are we morally culpable for our inaction?" A student named Brian raised his hand. "But what if speaking up makes things worse? What if it puts you in danger?" "An excellent question, Mr. Patterson nodded. "We must weigh our obligation to help against the potential consequences of intervention. But we should also examine whether our fear of consequences is justified or whether it's simply a convenient excuse for inaction." Maya stared at her notebook, but she wasn't taking notes. She was thinking about 3 years of justified fear, of carefully calculated silence, of choosing safety over justice. She had told herself she was protecting herself, but she was beginning to understand that she had also been protecting Jessica. By never challenging the lies, never contradicting the rumors, never speaking up for the victims, she had allowed Jessica to believe her behavior was acceptable. Silence had been interpreted as consent. The revelation was both liberating and terrifying. When the final bell rang, Maya gathered her books and headed toward her locker, but she was intercepted again. This time, it was Principal Davis, a stern woman in her 50s who commanded respect through competence rather than intimidation. "Ms. Chun," she said formally, "I'd like to see you in my office." Maya's stomach dropped. She had been dreading this moment since lunch. The confrontation in the cafeteria had been public, dramatic, and impossible to ignore. Of course the administration would want to address it. She followed Principal Davis through the emptying hallways to the main office, acutely aware of the curious stares from other students. This was exactly the kind of attention she had spent years avoiding, and now it felt like being caught in a spotlight with nowhere to hide. Principal Davis's office was a study in controlled authority, diplomas on the walls, awards for educational excellence, a desk that was organized but not sterile. She gestured for Maya to sit in one of the chairs across from her desk. "I'm going to be direct with you, Maya," she began. "What happened in the cafeteria today was extraordinary. I've never seen a conflict defused so thoroughly without violence." Maya blinked in surprise. She had expected accusations, punishment, perhaps a suspension. She hadn't expected praise. However, Principal Davis continued, "I'm also concerned about the personal information that was shared. Some of what you revealed about Ms. Martinez was quite serious." "Everything I said was true," Maya replied quietly. "I believe you. That's what concerns me. How did you come by this information?" Maya considered her answer carefully. "People talk. They don't think anyone is listening, but I am." Principal Davis studied her for a long moment. "Ms. Chun, I've been an educator for 25 years. I've seen every type of student conflict imaginable, but I've never encountered a situation quite like this one." She leaned forward slightly. "You've essentially ended 3 years of systematic bullying with a single conversation. No violence, no threats, just truth. Do you understand how remarkable that is?" Maya wasn't sure how to respond. She had been defending herself, nothing more. "The question now," Principal Davis continued, "is what we do next. Ms. Martinez has been called to my office as well. Some of the allegations you made are quite serious, particularly the one about academic dishonesty." Maya felt a stab of regret. "I didn't mean to get her in serious trouble. I just wanted her to leave me alone." "I understand. But when cheating is alleged, we have to investigate. It's not just about you and Jessica anymore. It's about the integrity of our academic environment." Principal Davis pulled out a notebook and pen. "I'm going to need you to provide details about what you witnessed. Times, dates, specific incidents. Can you do that?" Maya nodded slowly. She had opened this door. Now she had to walk through it completely. For the next hour, she methodically detailed 3 years of observations. The stolen fundraiser money, the plagiarized essays, the SAT cheating, the lies and manipulations that had destroyed relationships and reputations. It was exhausting work, but also cathartic. For the first time in her life, Maya Chun was telling the complete truth about what she had seen and heard. When they finished, Principal Davis looked overwhelmed by the scope of what had been revealed. "Maya, this is far more extensive than I had imagined. If even half of these allegations prove true, Ms. Martinez could face serious consequences. Suspension, possibly expulsion for the academic violations." "I didn't want to destroy her life," Maya said quietly. "I just wanted her to STO 2 weeks later." Lincoln High School felt like a different place entirely. The news of Jessica Martinez's suspension had sent shockwaves through the student body, not because anyone was particularly surprised by her behavior, but because someone had finally held her accountable for it. Maya arrived at school to find her world completely transformed. Students who had never acknowledged her existence now nodded respectfully when she passed. Teachers looked at her with new interest. The invisible girl had become visible, and the view was both thrilling and overwhelming. She was no longer eating lunch alone. Emma Rodriguez had claimed the seat across from her permanently, and their table had become an unofficial gathering place for students who had previously felt voiceless. Samantha Park joined them regularly, along with Derek Martinez, who was slowly rebuilding his confidence after learning the truth about his sabotaged relationship. "Did you hear?" Emma said as she sat down with her lunch tray. Jessica's parents are transferring her to Westfield Academy. Maya looked up from her book. When? End of the month. Apparently, the academic probation was the last straw. Her parents want a fresh start somewhere with a stronger disciplinary structure. Samantha leaned forward conspiratorially. I heard she has to repeat all her classes from this semester because of the plagiarism investigation. They couldn't determine which assignments were actually her work. Maya felt an unexpected stab of sympathy for Jessica. The consequences had been swift and severe: suspension for academic dishonesty, loss of college recommendation letters, and now transfer to a school known for its strict policies and military-style discipline. I wonder if she learned anything from all this, Derek mused, picking at his sandwich. Or if she just blames everyone else for what happened. People don't usually change unless they want to, Maya replied thoughtfully. And wanting to change requires admitting you were wrong. Emma studied Maya's face with the perceptive eye she had developed over their growing friendship. You feel bad for her. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded slowly. I didn't want to destroy her life. I just wanted her to stop destroying other people's lives. You didn't destroy anything, Samantha said firmly. You just revealed what was already there. Jessica destroyed her own life with her choices. Maya wasn't entirely convinced. She had learned the power of truth-telling, but she had also learned its weight. Words, once spoken, could not be taken back. Consequences, once set in motion, followed their own logic regardless of the speaker's intentions. Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus Thompson, who approached their table with his usual easy confidence. Since the confrontation, he had made a point of checking on Maya regularly, and their casual friendship had deepened into genuine mutual respect. Mind if I join you? He asked, gesturing to an empty chair. Of course, Maya said, making room for him at their increasingly crowded table. Marcus settled in and looked around the group with satisfaction. You know, this is exactly what this place needed. A table where people can actually talk without worrying about who's listening and planning to use it against them later. Speaking of which, Emma said with a mischievous grin, Maya, you should know that you've become something of a legend around here. They're calling you the Truth Keeper. Maya groaned. That sounds ominous. Are you kidding? Derek laughed. It's awesome. You're like this mythical figure who knows everyone's secrets, but only uses the information for good. I'm not a superhero, Maya protested. I'm just someone who pays attention. That's exactly what makes you powerful, Marcus said seriously. Most people are so busy talking that they never learn to listen. You've been listening for 3 years. Maya was spared from responding by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Patterson, the college counselor who had started this entire chain of events, approached their table with a folder in her hands. Maya, could I speak with you for a moment? She asked. Maya excused herself and followed Mrs. Patterson to a quieter corner of the cafeteria. I wanted to give you an update on your college applications, Mrs. Patterson said, opening the folder. The essay you submitted about finding your voice was extraordinary. Combined with your academic record and the teacher recommendations, you're going to have some interesting choices to make. She pulled out several letters, each bearing the letterhead of prestigious universities. Early acceptance to Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. Full scholarship offers from MIT and Caltech. And Princeton wants to interview you for their special honors program. Maya stared at the letters, feeling overwhelmed. A month ago, she had been planning to attend the state university to minimize costs and attention. Now she was being offered opportunities she had never imagined possible. How did they know about everything that happened, she asked. Mrs. Patterson smiled. Your essay about finding the courage to speak up resonated with admissions committees. But it wasn't just the dramatic elements. It was the maturity and self-reflection you demonstrated. You wrote about making difficult choices, accepting responsibility, and learning from consequences. Those are exactly the qualities top universities are looking for. Maya held the acceptance letters in her hands, feeling their weight both literally and figuratively. Each one represented a path she could choose, a future she could build, a life she could create. Take your time deciding, Mrs. Patterson advised. You have until May 1st to make your choice. But Maya, whatever you decide, I'm proud of you for finding your voice. Maya returned to her table in a daze, the acceptance letters tucked carefully into her backpack. Her friends noticed her expression immediately. Good news or bad news? Emma asked. Good news. I think. Maybe overwhelming news. She told them about the college acceptances, and their excited congratulations drew attention from nearby tables. Word spread quickly that the quiet girl who had taken down Jessica Martinez was also an academic superstar with Ivy League offers. Maya felt the familiar desire to disappear, but she fought it down. She was learning to be comfortable with attention, to see it as a tool rather than a threat. As lunch ended and students began filtering back to classes, Maya found herself walking with Marcus toward their shared AP Physics class. Can I ask you something? He said as they navigated the crowded hallway. Sure. Do you ever regret it? Speaking up, I mean. Changing everything. Maya considered the question carefully. A month ago, she had been safe in her invisibility, unknown and unnoticed. Now she was visible to everyone, with all the complications that visibility brought. No, she said finally. I regret waiting so long to do it. In AP Physics, Mr. Chun, no relation, despite the shared surname, was discussing momentum and energy transfer. Maya found herself thinking about the parallels to human behavior. Jessica had been a force moving through the school, causing damage through a series of collisions. Maya had provided an equal and opposite force, bringing the system back into balance. The metaphor felt appropriate. Change required energy, and energy required courage. For too long, Maya had been storing her potential energy, keeping it locked away where it couldn't affect anything. When she finally released it, the results had been dramatic. After school, Maya walked home through streets that felt familiar yet different. She was still the same person who had made this journey hundreds of times before, but her understanding of herself had fundamentally changed. She climbed the stairs to her grandmother's apartment, her mind still processing the day's developments. The college acceptances were exciting, but they also represented a choice she wasn't ready to make. Each university offered different opportunities, different futures, different versions of who she might become. Nai was waiting for her with tea and homemade dumplings, a ritual they shared every afternoon. The old woman took one look at Maya's face and knew something significant had happened. Good news? She asked in Mandarin. Maya pulled out the acceptance letters and spread them on the small kitchen table. Nai examined each one carefully, her weathered fingers tracing the prestigious letterheads with something approaching reverence. Your parents would be so proud, she said softly. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Her parents had died when she was 8, but she still carried their dreams with her. They had come to America seeking opportunities for their children, and now their daughter was being offered the very best the country had to offer. Which will you choose? Nai asked. I don't know, Maya admitted. They're all so different. Harvard for prestige, MIT for science, Stanford for innovation. How do you choose between dreams you never thought possible? Nai poured tea into 2 delicate porcelain cups and considered the question. When I was your age in China, I had no choices. Your grandfather was chosen for me. My work was assigned to me. Even my children's names were approved by the committee. Choice is a luxury I never had. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. But you have something more valuable than choice. You have wisdom. You've learned to listen, to observe, to understand people. That will serve you well wherever you go. Maya nodded, understanding that her grandmother was telling her to trust herself. The skills that had made her invisible for 3 years, observation, patience, careful analysis, were the same skills that would help her navigate whatever path she chose. That evening, Maya sat at her desk writing in the journal she had started keeping since the confrontation with Jessica. She wrote about the college acceptances, about her growing friendships, about the strange experience of being seen and heard after years of hiding. But, mostly, she wrote about the girl she used to be and the woman she was becoming. The transformation hadn't happened overnight in a dramatic confrontation. It had been building for years, through every moment of silent observation, every injustice witnessed, every word left unspoken until the moment was right. Maya Chin had learned that real power wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about being the most truthful one. And sometimes, truth was quiet until the moment it needed to be heard. She closed her journal and looked out the window at the city lights stretching into the distance. Somewhere out there was her future, brilliant and uncertain, challenging and full of possibility. For the first time in her life, Maya Chen couldn't wait to see what happened next. The quiet girl who had perfected invisibility had finally learned to shine, and the world was ready to see her light. The girl who had once hidden in corners now sat in the center of her own life, comfortable with visibility, confident in her voice, ready for whatever came next. She had faced down bullies and discovered her own strength. She had spoken truth and accepted the consequences. She had found her voice by first learning when to use it. Maya Chen was no longer invisible, and that, she realized, was exactly how it should be. Hurting people. Sometimes stopping someone from causing harm requires serious consequences, Principal Davis replied. You can't control how other people respond to the truth. You can only control whether you tell it. She leaned back in her chair and studied Maya with new respect. You know, in all my years as an educator, I've learned that the quietest students often see the most. But you're the first one who's had the courage to act on what you've observed. Maya left the principal's office feeling drained, but oddly hopeful. She had done the right thing, even if the consequences would be complicated. As she walked toward the exit, she saw Jessica Martinez entering the building with her parents. Jessica's face was pale and frightened, and when their eyes met, Maya saw something she had never seen before, genuine fear. But she also saw something else. Recognition, perhaps even respect. The quiet girl who had spent years invisible had finally made herself seen. And, in doing so, she had discovered that sometimes the most powerful action was simply telling the truth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new opportunities to decide who she wanted to be. But, for the first time in her life, Maya Chen knew she was strong enough to handle whatever came next. The girl who had perfected disappearing had learned something more valuable: how to stand still and be counted. That was incredible, she said. I had no idea you knew all that stuff. I wish I didn't, Maya replied honestly. But people tell their secrets in front of invisible girls. They walked together toward their next class, and Maya realized that something fundamental had shifted in her world. She was no longer invisible, no longer the quiet girl in the corner. She had shown her teeth, and now everyone knew she was capable of biting. The question was what would happen next. In the complex ecosystem of high school, every action created ripples, and Maya had just thrown a very large stone into very still water. She was about to discover that sometimes making waves was exactly what the world needed. After dinner, she sat at her small desk and opened her homework, but the words blurred on the page. Her mind kept returning to the moment when Jessica had pushed her shoulder, and she had chosen not to react. In that instant, she had discovered something powerful about herself. She had learned that sometimes the strongest response was no response at all. But she had also learned that once you stopped hiding, once you let people see who you really were, there was no going back to invisibility. The quiet girl was gone forever, replaced by someone who was still quiet, but no longer silent. Maya closed her textbook and stared out the window at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new confrontations, new opportunities to discover who she was becoming. For the first time in her life, she was looking forward to finding out. Outnumbered and outgunned, facing 4 students who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt oddly calm. Jessica's face contorted with rage. You're going to regret that. Maya didn't respond. She simply stood there, watching, waiting. Something in her stillness seemed to unnerve Jessica, who had expected tears or pleas or some other display of weakness to feed on. Say something, Jessica demanded, shoving Maya's shoulder. But Maya had learned something important in that moment of confrontation. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was power. And sometimes, the most devastating response was no response at all. The game had changed, and Maya Chen was no longer playing defense.